So, here's something almost nobody connected this week. In just 7 days, 4 of the most powerful forces in the world, a US Senator, the Trump White House, Elon Musk, and a Chinese AI lab, each made a grab for a piece of artificial intelligence. And they all moved in completely different directions. Senator Bernie Sanders tried to hand the public half of big AI. The Trump White House, stay with me here, said it wants Americans to own a stake too. Then Elon Musk paid $60 billion to buy one of the tools developers code with. And a Chinese lab took a model good enough to rattle GPT 5.5 and gave it away for free. 4 moves, 4 headlines, each filed under a different beat: politics, a merger, an open source release, a national security fight. But here's the thing. They're not 4 stories. They're one story, told 4 ways. Because this week, the AI race quietly stopped being about which model is smartest and became a fight over who actually owns the machine, its profits, its tools, the model itself, and who's even allowed to switch it on. So let's walk all 4 with the receipts, because once you see them in one frame, the whole week looks different. So grab number 1, Washington. On June 18th, Senator Bernie Sanders introduced the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. And a sovereign wealth fund is just a government-owned investment fund that pays the public a cut, the way Norway does with its oil money. Now here's the mechanism, because the mechanism is the whole story. The bill would put a one-time 50% tax on the stock, the actual shares, not cash, of any AI company with over $200 million a year in sales. Those shares go into the public fund, and the fund pays a 5% dividend every year. Sanders estimates that builds a fund worth around $7 trillion and cuts a check of more than $1,000 to every American annually. But, and this matters, those are Sanders' own numbers. There's no independent budget score behind them, and they ride on AI valuations that are mostly private. So treat the $7 trillion as a projection, not a fact. Still, the mechanism is written down and real. And there's a second piece most people missed. A 7-member commission confirmed by the Senate that would actually vote the public's shares to block a company from doing something harmful. So that reads like classic left redistribution. Tax the rich, mail the checks, move on. Here's why you shouldn't. Because that same week, the Trump White House was reaching for almost the same idea. On a podcast released those very days, Vice President J.D. Vance said President Trump likes the idea of the U.S. holding a stake in American AI companies. And he reframed the whole thing, not around lost jobs, but around wealth concentration. The worry, he said, is the old Industrial Revolution problem, the rich getting dramatically richer. The difference is control. Now, Sanders' version is compulsory, and the public actually votes those shares. Vance prefers what he calls pre-distribution. You get an ownership stake up front, but nobody in government votes it for you. And this isn't just talk. Reporting from SEMA4 that week showed the administration genuinely split on how one secretary wants individual Trump accounts, another wants a single national fund. So here's the tell. The far left and the populist right, in the same 5 days, both landed on the same instinct. The public should own a piece of big AI. They're not fighting about whether, they're fighting about how and about who gets to vote those shares. There's one more catch, and it's a big one. Legal scholars are already asking whether a forced 50% equity transfer is even constitutional, whether it's a tax at all or a taking the government has to pay for. A question the Supreme Court left half open, so this could stall in the courts long before committee. But hold on to that idea, the public owning AI, because it's about to collide with grab number 2. So while Washington argues about owning a share of AI, Elon Musk just went out and bought a piece outright. On June 16th, SpaceX filed an 8K with the SEC, the market's regulator. That's the form a company sends the moment something major happens. The disclosure: SpaceX is buying Sphere, maker of the coding tool Cursor, for $60 billion. All stock. Musk paid with freshly printed SpaceX shares, not $1 of cash. The deal's set to close this quarter. And here's the part that's almost funny. The deal basically paid for itself. SpaceX had gone public 4 days earlier, And in those 4 days, the stock jumped about 43%, adding something like $740 billion in market value. Think about that for a second. The price tag was $60 billion. The 4-day pop was over $700 billion. So Musk bought a $60 billion company with a fraction of 1 week's gain. So the obvious read is that Musk bought the hottest tool in AI coding. Except, and this is the buried receipt, Cursor was already losing. According to spending data from the corporate card firm Ramp, Cursor's share of AI coding tool spend fell from 41% last June to about 26% this May. Now, that's spend share among Ramp's customers, not every developer, but the direction is confirmed across outlets. While Cursor slid, Anthropic's Claude Code took roughly half the category. And here's why that stings. At its peak, Cursor was reportedly sending roughly half of Anthropic's revenue straight back to Anthropic because Cursor ran on Claude. It was paying its biggest rival to exist. So what did Musk actually buy? Not a winner. The last independent domino. Look at the map. Copilot is Microsoft's, Claude Code is Anthropic's. OpenAI has its own, and now Cursor is SpaceX and xAI's, which already owns Grok and a giant supercomputer. So the real prize isn't Cursor's shrinking share, it's vertical integration, owning every layer, the chips, the model, and the app developers type into. You pay no one else, and that giant pipe of Claude usage quietly points at your own model instead. One honest caveat: not everyone thinks the stock is worth what it's printing. Morningstar pegs SpaceX's fair value far below where it trades. So the supercurrency that paid for this could cool fast. So Grab 1 was owning the profits. Grab 2 is owning the tools, which raises a question. What happens when someone decides AI shouldn't be ownable at all? So, right on cue, that same week, a Chinese lab made the exact opposite move. ZAI, formerly GPU, released GLM 5.2, its flagship model, with open weights under an MIT license, which is about as permissive as software licenses get. Open weights just means the trained model is published. Anyone can download it, run it, and build on it with no permission and no monthly bill. And the headline was a banger. An open model that beats GPT 5.5 on coding for a sixth of the price. Now, let's read that claim line by line, because this is where the hype and the truth split. The wins are real, but selective. On SwiBench Pro, a test where the model fixes real bugs in real code bases, GLM scores 62, GPT 5.5 scores 59. And it's the first open model ever to cross 80% on Terminal Bench, which measures real software work in a command line. But here's the catch. On that same Terminal Bench, its 81 still trails GPT 5.5's 84 and Claude Opus's 85. And on the overall intelligence scoreboard from the independent lab Artificial Analysis, it lands behind GPT 5.5 entirely. So, beats GPT 5.5 is true on a couple of coding tests and false on the overall ranking. And the price? Also true, with an asterisk. On the sticker, GLM's output runs about a sixth of GPT 5.5's, but it's a chatty model, so the real cost per finished task narrows that gap. But here's the deepest catch, the one the spec sheet buries. Free splits two ways. The secure way is to host the model yourself, so your code never leaves your network. The problem? This thing needs about 744 gigabytes of memory, roughly 8 of NVIDIA's high-end data center chips, just to load. That's not a laptop. That's not most companies. So most people will reach for the cheap path instead, ZAI's hosted service. And that routes your code through a Chinese company, one subject to China's national intelligence law, which can compel firms to hand data to the state. So here's the honest verdict the launch slide skipped. Frontier cheap if you can self-host it, and the cheap version is exactly the part a security team will veto. As the developer Simon Willison put it, this is probably the most powerful text-only open weights model you can get your hands on. And another reviewer clocked it near Opus's coding quality for under a fifth of the price. But slower, a cost win, not a clean capability win. So, own the profits, own the tools, or make the model unownable. 3 grabs. And then the US government showed it could overrule all three with a single order. So, grab 4. And this one's the most unsettling, because it isn't about money at all. It's about the off switch. Here's what people get wrong about it. Most assume Anthropic pulled its top models for safety, or that this is a crackdown on China. Both are backwards. So here's what actually happened. On June 12th, at 5:21 in the evening, Anthropic says it received a US export control directive, a national security order restricting who's allowed to use a product. And the order barred access for all foreign nationals, people outside the US, plus non-citizens working inside it, which included some of Anthropic's own staff. And Anthropic couldn't verify every user's nationality in real time. So on short notice, reportedly about 90 minutes, it pulled 2 of its most powerful models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, completely dark. For everyone, worldwide. And as of this week, they're still dark. Day 8. So what triggered it? Reportedly, a partner, widely reported as Amazon, showed the model could be jailbroken. A jailbreak is just a trick that gets an AI to ignore its own safety rules. Anthropic describes this one narrowly: getting the model to read a codebase and fix software flaws. The kind of thing, it notes, that GPT 5.5 can already do too. And here's where it became a standoff. According to David Sachs, the former White House AI czar, now co-chair of the President's Science Council, the administration gave Anthropic's CEO a choice: fix the jailbreak or take the models offline. He refused both. So the export control came down. The ball, Sachs said, is in Anthropic's court. Now that's the government's account, and Anthropic disputes the framing. So hold it as one side, not gospel. Anthropic's position is that you don't recall a model used by hundreds of millions over one narrow jailbreak that exists in other models anyway. And underneath it all is an uncomfortable truth. A Cornell researcher put it plainly: making a model truly jailbreak-proof is an unsolved problem. It's not a bug you patch once. Anyone who promises 0 jailbreaks forever, one security exec said, is selling something. So sit with what just happened. The most capable version of a frontier AI got switched off for the entire planet in about 90 minutes over a disputed flaw. And this is a model the Defense Department's own tech chief said it had used to find and fix cyber vulnerabilities. When's it back? Nobody's sure. And a prediction market this week put it near a 57% chance by July 1st. Anthropic says days. But the precedent is the real story. The government just proved it can reach into the cloud and flip the switch on the smartest tool we've built. So step back and look at all 4 in one frame. A senator wants the public to own AI's profits. The White House wants people to hold a stake too. Then Musk goes and buys up the tools. Open source tries to make the model itself unownable, and the government shows it can decide who's even allowed to turn it on. For 3 years, the AI race was a contest over capability, whose model scores higher. But this week, all 4 moves were about something else entirely: control. Who owns the equity, who owns the tools, who owns the model, and who controls the access. And here's the part that should stay with you. Notice who's missing from all 4 grabs: you, me, the actual public. We're the prize everyone says they're fighting for. Sanders' dividend, Vance's stake, open weights for all. But look closer. In every one of these moves, the real decision is who sits at the table. And so far, that table is senators, presidents, billionaires, and labs. Now, maybe the Sanders bill dies in committee, maybe consolidation slows, maybe open source closes the gap, or the freeze ends next week and we forget it happened. Or maybe this is the week we look back on as the moment the question changed, from how smart can we make it to who gets to own it. So, the whole week in one breath. Sanders moved to tax half of big AI into a public fund, and the Trump White House, from the other side, agreed the public should own a piece. Musk bought the last independent coding tool for $60 billion in stock that basically printed itself. China's ZA gave away a model that beats GPT 5.5 on some coding tests, with a self-hosting wall and a data law catch. And the US government switched off Anthropic's best models for the whole world in about 90 minutes. 4 grabs, 1 prize. And the prize was never the smartest model. It was control of the machine. So is this the week AI stopped being a technology and started becoming territory? Maybe. But the lines are being drawn fast by people who mostly aren't asking us. So here's the real question for you. Of these 4, Washington, Musk, open source, or the government's off switch? Which one actually decides who controls AI 10 years from now? Drop your pick in the comments. I read them. And if this changed how the week looks to you, if 4 headlines just turned into 1 story, subscribe. Because that's the whole point of this channel. The connection nobody else is drawing.